Imagine a suburb where police sirens and helicopter sounds are heard almost every night, where on the streets of Bondy, in the 19th arrondissement of Paris, people fought not for success, but for survival. Imagine a district forgotten by wealthy France, where tens of thousands of immigrants from North Africa, Cameroon, Senegal, and Portugal built a modest life in high-rise buildings overflowing with families, where each room was multifunctional, a bedroom by day, a kitchen by evening, and a playroom for children at night. Imagine a small house on the outskirts of this forgotten place, where on December 20th, 1998, a boy was born into a family of athletes, destined to become not just a footballer, but a symbol that there is always a way out of the slums if you have an example before your eyes. Kylian Mbappé Lottin is a story of how two sporting dreams from two continents met in Paris and gave birth to a legend that will inspire millions of people for decades. The history of the Mbappé family began thousands of kilometers from France, in the dense forests of Cameroon. Kylian's father, Wilfried Mbappé Lottin, was born in 1965 in Cameroon, where life was even harsher than in the suburbs of Paris. Cameroon is a country of contrasts, where modern capitals coexist with villages where people live as their ancestors did, and where education and sports are the only way to escape poverty. Wilfried was one of those rare people who managed to escape the trap of poverty. He studied, received an education in physical education and sports, and, most importantly, discovered a passion for football. Not as a professional player, as his physical attributes were modest, but as a coach. Wilfried came to France in the late 1980s, when France was actively opening its doors to migrants from its former colonies. He arrived in Paris with a diploma, a dream, and a firm determination to build a life that would be more dignified than that of his parents in Cameroon. Starting work in local sports schools, Wilfried soon noticed that his true calling was not just teaching physical education, but shaping athletes, teaching them not only technique, but also spirit, discipline, and self-belief. Kylian's mother, Fayza Lamari, came to France from Algeria around the same time. If the father was the embodiment of sporting ambition, the mother was the embodiment of sporting talent. Fayza played handball professionally. These were the golden years of French handball, and she was part of a movement that transformed this sport from little known to popular. Fayza's handball required speed, agility, strategic thinking, and an indomitable spirit. These qualities would later be passed on to her son almost perfectly. When Wilfried and Fayza met in the mid-1990s, both were young, both were athletes, both came from countries where sport was the only path to dignity. They fell in love not so much at first sight, but because they spoke the same language, the language of victories, training, discipline, and an endless belief that a person can reshape their destiny through hard work and will. When the boy was born in late December 1998, it seemed that the universe had written his birth with a pen dipped in destiny. Wilfried and Fayza named their son Kylian, a name without a strong origin, which sounded French but contained a hint of something more universal, global. In the Mbappé house there were two other children, adopted son Gires Kembo Ekoko, a Cameroonian whom Wilfried took under his guardianship in honor of his homeland, and Kylian's younger brother, Ethan. But the main, central element of the family was not the size of the house or the amount of money in the wallet. The main thing was the atmosphere. The atmosphere in which the boy grew up was saturated with sports, as the air is saturated with oxygen. The father passed by his son's room in the morning with a backpack of footballs, in the evening with an attendance record for training sessions. Weekends were planned around matches and training camps. Kylian did not remember a time when he was not involved in sports. It seems that the ball ended up in his hands, or rather, at his feet, at the same time he learned to walk. At the age of 4, when other children were still afraid of falling and getting hurt, little Kylian was already running across the muddy fields of Bondy, leaving a trail in the water and mud, chasing a ball that seemed to him a living creature demanding affection and attention. His father, watching his son, saw in his movements not just a game, but a calling. Wilfried understood early on that his son was not just an athlete. Kylian was obsessed. Obsessed like a person is obsessed with breathing, eating, the desire to live. Obsessed so much that on dark evenings, when the house smelled of soup and news voices in 2 languages emanated from the speakers, little Kylian still asked for a walk with the ball. At 6 years old, when the boy went to a Catholic school in Bondy, an institution where children from families who believed that education and faith saved from the abyss of the streets were sent. Wilfried made a historic decision. He enrolled his son in the youth team of the AS Bondy club, a club where he himself worked as a coach. AS Bondy was a modest institution, an artificial turf field, old locker rooms, equipment that had seen better days, but the spirit was young and hungry. Here, on this field, Kylian stood in line with dozens of other boys from the same Bondy. Children of immigrant doctors, children of office cleaners, children who had one thing in common: a dream, and a father ready to protect that dream. At the same time, his idols were the greatest. Cristiano Ronaldo, whom he saw on television doing the impossible. Zinedine Zidane, who was French like him, but came from Marseille with his own story of poverty. Ronaldo Nazário, the phenomenon, with his insane speed and finishes. On weekends, little Kylian played for Bondy, obeying the strict instructions of his father, who was both his coach and mentor, translating sports lessons into life lessons. But the smooth transition was invisible and inaudible. Between the school in Bondy with its Catholic prayers and traditions, between the dense houses of his neighborhood, and between the bustling life of Paris, which was nearby but seemed like another planet, a door of opportunity opened. When Kylian was 9 or 10 years old, his talent became more and more obvious. He was not the fastest boy, not the strongest, but he possessed something rarer: vision, intelligence, the ability to anticipate the movement of the ball 2 seconds earlier than his opponent. This attracted the attention of scouts. And soon, the life of Kylian Mbappé, a boy from a forgotten suburb, began to change its course forever. When Kylian was 11 years old, his life took a turn that happens to 1 in a million. Wilfried Mbappé, who had long understood that his son surpassed the capabilities of provincial AS Bondy, made a decision that required enormous sacrifices from the family. He learned about the legendary Clairefontaine Academy, the national football talent training center of France, located 30 kilometers from Paris, in the suburb of Fontainebleau, among forests and grassy fields where only the chosen few got in. Clairefontaine was not just a school, it was a sanctuary of French football, a place where superstars were raised. Thierry Henry, one of the greatest forwards in history, underwent his development there. Nicolas Anelka, a Champions League winner, began his path to greatness there. William Gallas, Patrick Vieira, Laurent Blanc, dozens of French football legends came out of this sanctuary. The same expectations and the same fire of opportunity burned in the eyes of 11-year-old Kylian when his father submitted the documents for selection. The competition for Clairefontaine was tougher than getting into Oxford or Cambridge. Every year, only 22 people were admitted to the academy, exactly as many players as in 2 football teams. Thousands of talents who came from all over France fought for these 22 spots. The selection was multi-level, merciless, without regard for popularity or media attention. Here, they looked at one factor: the potential to become a superstar, not just a professional footballer. Academy director Jean-Claude Lafargue often told the coaches, "After 16 years, a player's progress is limited to a maximum of 20%. Before 16, it's clay that we can mold into whoever we wish." Kylian passed the selection. His characteristic was concise but eloquent. Explosive forward with exceptional vision of the game, anticipates opponents' moves 2 seconds in advance, can work with both feet, sees options that others don't. In early 2010, armed with a suitcase and tears of farewell, 11-year-old Kylian moved to Clairefontaine. The first days at the academy were a shock. The boy from Bondy, accustomed to living with his family, with his father who prepared him for every training session, suddenly found himself in a boarding school among 100 other champion boys, each of whom believed he was the next Henry. In the dormitory, Kylian was housed with 3 other students. The bed linen was government-issued, the laundry was communal, and the schedule was planned with military precision. Mornings began at 7 o'clock, breakfast at 7:30, school lessons from 8 to 4 o'clock, then training. 2 sessions a day on natural grass fields. He was only allowed to go home on weekends. Wilfried, however, found a way to support his son. On Saturdays and Sundays, the boy returned to Bondy, where he played for the team coached by his father. It was there, on the familiar fields of his childhood, that Kylian found peace and continuity. But his father made no allowances for him. One day, when Kylian missed a scoring opportunity in a match, Wilfried called him aside after the game and, in front of the entire team, uttered words that he remembered forever. "You can practice your left-footed shots at Clairefontaine all you want, but here we play for results. If you miss such opportunities, it means you're not ready to be a champion." Kylian heard it like the crack of a whip. He would later recall, "I remembered that lesson for life. My father taught me that talent is not an advantage, it's a responsibility." His progress at Clairefontaine was phenomenal. At 11, he was already playing with 13-year-olds, at 13 with 15-year-olds. The academy coaches looked at each other in bewilderment. They saw a rare phenomenon, a child who was not just faster and more technical, but also thought like an adult coach, anticipating the flow of the game, reading opponents' positions as if he saw several seconds ahead. Rumors of the young genius from Paris quickly spread across Europe. At 14, Kylian received an invitation he had dreamed of his entire life. He was invited for a trial at Real Madrid. At the airport, he was met by Zinedine Zidane himself, the royal club's sporting director and his childhood hero. Everything was like in a movie. Kylian was led through the sacred corridors of the Bernabéu, shown the stadium where Ronaldo and Zidane played, and introduced to legendary footballers. Zidane personally spoke with him, seeing in the young Frenchman a reflection of his own past journey. But when Kylian returned home to Paris, a decision was made at a family council that many considered insane. His father and mother told their son, "No, we are staying in France." The reason was not modesty or fear. The reason was strategy. Zidane, who was the main reason for the invitation, had been transferred to the position of Ancelotti's assistant. Kylian's parents, especially Fayza, an experienced athlete, understood. Without a patron at Real, the path of a young foreigner is much more difficult. Instead, they reached an agreement with Monaco, a small principality sponsored by Russian capital and known for its special attention to its youth academy. In the summer of 2013, when Kylian was just 14 years old, an event occurred that might seem ordinary for the football world, but for the boy from Bondy, it was a turning point. Officially signing a contract with Monaco, the young prodigy received his first professional agreement. The sum seemed modest: €400,000 signing bonus and €650 a month youth team salary, but for the Mbappé family, it was a recognition that their sacrifices, trips from Paris to Clairefontaine, pressure on Kylian, all of it was not in vain. The Principality of Monaco, located on the Mediterranean coast between France and Italy, offered the boy a completely new world. It was a country of contrasts. Luxurious villas and casinos coexisted with simple neighborhoods where workers and employees lived, including football club staff. Monaco was an ambitious club, sponsored by Russian capital, with modern infrastructure and a progressive philosophy, to develop young talents, not buy stars. Kylian's first 2 years in Monaco were intense work without media attention. He lived in the youth section, trained twice a day, and studied and did homework in the evenings. The head coach of the youth team, Bruno Irles, later recalled, "Kylian was obsessed, but sometimes the obsession bordered on naivety. He wanted everything at once. He rushed, skipped defensive duties, thought he could run forward and score goals, and defense could be completely ignored." There were times when the coaches left the boy in the cabin or sent him to redo an exercise because he did not listen to instructions. Once Kylian was punished for refusing to perform defensive actions during a youth championship match, considering them beneath his dignity. Wilfried, learning about this, came to Monaco and gave his son a harsh lesson. "You think you're a star? You're not a star, you're a boy. Stars are created by discipline, work, and humility." Kylian remembered that lesson. On December 2nd, 2015, a moment occurred that changed everything. In the 88th minute of the match against Caen in the French Championship, 16-year-old Kylian came on as a substitute for Fabio Coentrão. It was an ordinary match, an ordinary substitution, but for Monaco, it was a revolution. Kylian Mbappé became the youngest debutant in the club's history, breaking the record of the legendary Thierry Henry, who had done it a decade and a half earlier. The match ended 1-0, and the boy from Bondy spent only a few minutes on the field, but those minutes were the beginning of everything else. 8 days later, on December 10th, Kylian played in the Europa League against London's Tottenham and provided an assist. His name was already in all the newspapers. Throughout the winter of 2015-16, he was in the starting lineup occasionally, but each time his appearance on the field electrified not only the fans, but also the club's management. The 2016-17 season was a turning point. Kylian started the season as a young player and ended it as a star. In October 2016, he scored his first goal for the main team against Troyes. He was 17 years and 62 days old, and he broke Thierry Henry's record, who was considered one of the greatest forwards in history. By the end of the season, Kylian's statistics were staggering. 13 goals in the league, plus goals scored in European competitions and the French Cup. The most striking thing was that he scored these goals starting in only 18 matches, an average of 1 goal per hour of play, while the legendary Messi needed 70 minutes and Aubameyang 90. The French press wrote, "This is no longer a talent, it's a phenomenon of nature." Real, Chelsea, Manchester United, Barcelona all considered the boy from Monaco the most desirable young player in the world. But Kylian remained in Monaco, working under coach Leonardo Jardim, who believed in the young Frenchman as much as Wilfried believed in his son. Jardim gave him the opportunity to grow without pressure, allowed him to make mistakes, learn, and develop. Together, they created a revolutionary tactic. Kylian played on the right wing, but was not tied to the position. He constantly changed his place, creating chaos in the opponent's defense. In March 2017, at the age of 18 years and 95 days, Kylian debuted for the French national team against Luxembourg, becoming the youngest French player since 1955. The football world finally learned his name, and no one doubted that the boy from Bondy would become one of the greatest. The summer of 2017 was a turning point for Kylian. After an outstanding season at Monaco, where he scored 15 goals and became one of the main heroes of the club's championship title, he faced a choice that would determine his entire future career. Real Madrid, Manchester City, London's Chelsea, all the biggest clubs in Europe were hunting for the French prodigy, but history dictated otherwise. After the summer holidays, when Kylian was sunbathing and recuperating on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, his father and representatives announced news that shocked the football world. Kylian was moving to Paris Saint-Germain, which had just set an unprecedented transfer record by signing Brazilian genius Neymar for €222 million. PSG used a strategy that allowed them to circumvent financial fair play rules. First, 18-year-old Mbappé was loaned for 1 season and then necessarily bought out for €180 million. Kylian became the second most expensive footballer in the history of the sport. When the boy from Bondy first walked through the corridors of the Parc des Princes Stadium in Paris's 16th arrondissement, he was overcome with emotion. This was a place of dreams not only for him, but for thousands of French boys. But for Kylian, it was even more personal. He was playing in the city where he grew up, where his father still lived in the same neighborhood where he once worked as a coach. PSG gave him the number 29, the number of youth, the number of a rising star. Next to him in the club played Neymar, the genius of Brazilian football, and Edinson Cavani, the hurricane of Argentine attack. For 18-year-old Kylian, this was a university of life. If at Monaco he was a star, at PSG he was one star among many fireflies. He had to adapt, learn, observe, and absorb. His first match in a Parisian shirt was against Metz on September 5, 2017. Kylian scored 2 goals and provided 2 assists. Paris Saint-Germain thrashed their opponent 5-1. From that moment, an avalanche began. In his first 9 league matches, Kylian scored 4 goals and provided as many assists. In the Champions League, he was even more brilliant. In the group stage, when PSG met Bayern, the English champions of Europe, Kylian scored one of the 3 goals, staging a grand comeback. By December 2017, at the age of 18 years and 11 months, he had scored his 10th Champions League goal, becoming the youngest player in the history of the tournament to reach this milestone. Parisians rejoiced. In Paris Saint-Germain, not just a talent had appeared, but a star ready to compete with Messi and Ronaldo. Parallel to this explosive growth at the club, Kylian was called up to the French national team. His debut occurred in March 2017 against Luxembourg, when he came onto the field to loud applause from the Stade de France. But this was just the beginning. When the 2018 World Cup was announced in Russia, nothing else in France could be discussed except Kylian Mbappé. National team coach Didier Deschamps, who remembered the young midfielder from his playing days, said during the team's presentation, "Kylian is our future, perhaps even our present." Kylian was not yet 19 years old when he boarded the plane flying to Russia, to a place where a destiny awaited him that would change his life forever. In Russia, in the summer of 2018, a miracle happened. Kylian began his journey in the group of death. France played against Australia, Peru, and Denmark. Against Peru on June 22nd, Kylian scored 2 goals, becoming the youngest French goalscorer at World Cups, a record that resonated in his heart with the feeling that he had already entered history. But the most memorable match occurred against Argentina. At the Nizhny Novgorod Stadium in the 88th minute, Kylian put in a goal, then a second, then a third. Argentina lost 5-4 in a show match where the main hero was an 18-year-old French boy. In the final in Moscow against Croatia, Kylian came out with the captain's armband on his arm. Understanding that Griezmann wore it, he was still the star of the match, scored a goal in the final, becoming the second young star after Pelé to score in a World Cup final. When France received the trophy, when crowds of people filled the Champs-Élysées in Paris, Kylian realized his life had changed. When Kylian returned to Paris after the World Cup triumph, the city greeted him as a hero. Posters with his face were already hanging on the roads of Paris, people in cafes spoke only of him, the press awaited him at every corner. But for Kylian himself, this was not the end of the road, but only the beginning. He was 19 years old. His contract with PSG had already been permanently signed for 180 million euros, and a long road to greatness lay ahead of him. The 2018-19 season was explosive for the Parisians. Kylian scored 20 goals in the league, becoming the top scorer in Ligue 1. This was just the beginning. In 2019-20, his statistics improved, 23 goals in the league, to which goals in the Champions League, Cup, and other competitions were added. With each match, his name became more and more known throughout the world. On weekends, Kylian played for PSG, defeating opponents with mathematical precision, but the rest of the time his life was shrouded in mystery. His private life became the subject of numerous speculations in tabloids and celebrity websites. For several years, there were rumors of a relationship with British model and influencer Georgia May Jagger, who attracted his attention with her independence and lifestyle. Later, hints of romantic ties with model Danny Grace appeared, whom they saw together on the beaches of Miami and in Parisian nightclubs. But Kylian himself tried to avoid public comments, preferring that his life remain his personal territory. His mother, Fayza Lamari, once said in an interview words that surprised many. "My son has no life outside of football. Sometimes I worry about his mental health, about him wasting the best years of his youth only on balls and training." This was a mother's concern, but it contained truth. Kylian was obsessed with his skill with an almost morbid intensity. He started training at 7 in the morning, working for a long time on technique, speed, and shot accuracy. When his teammates finished work, Kylian remained on the field, scoring free kicks, working with coaches on special development programs. His mentor Thierry Henry, who came to give advice to the young genius, said, "Kylian is a machine. He is one of the few who can develop every minute, every second. His level of obsession reminds me of Cristiano Ronaldo in his prime." Kylian got tattoos, each of which had meaning. A memorial to Charlie Kirk, his paternal grandfather, numbers that indicated the days of his World Cup, dates of victories. His sports family, father Wilfried, who continued to give advice from afar, mother Fayza, who monitored his health, controlled his every activity daily. The 2021-22 season was the apotheosis of his time at PSG. Kylian scored 25 goals in Ligue 1, becoming the league's top scorer for the 5th consecutive time. At the same time, he provided 13 assists, the first in league history to achieve this in one season. In the Champions League, he scored 6 goals, helping PSG reach the quarter-finals. PSG won the French championship for the 10th time, and Kylian received the Ligue 1 Player of the Year award, the best player in the league. His individual achievements were countless. 5 times included in the FIFA Team of the Year: 2018, 2019, 2022, 2023, 2024. 3 times awarded the Copa Trophy as the best young player in the world, was a nominee for the Ballon d'Or. In 2023, he finished third in the voting for football's main award, behind only Messi and Ronaldo, but ahead of all other stars on the planet. The attitude of PSG fans towards Kylian was ambivalent. On the one hand, they adored him for his goals, his speed, for the miracles he performed on the field. The Ultras section chanted his name, created banners, songs about his talents thundered at the Parc des Princes. On the other hand, irritation began to grow in the hearts of some fans. Kylian was a star, but not a leader in the full sense of the word. He did not speak French to the media, speaking only English, which drew criticism. Some said that he was too focused on himself, that he did not bring the team as many Champions League victories as expected. In 7 years at PSG, Kylian won 6 French championships, 5 French Cups, 4 League Cups, but the Champions League stopped his team at the quarterfinal or semi-final stage. These were gold medals but not the most coveted trophies. Gradually, by 2023, rumors emerged. Kylian was tired of PSG. He needed a new challenge, a new team, a new mission. Real Madrid had been hunting him for a long time, like a hunter after a lion, offering huge sums, the opportunity to play on the sacred fields of Santiago Bernabéu, a chance to write a new page of his legend. As 2023 dawned, Kylian Mbappé was in a state of internal conflict that could hardly be overstated. He was the star of PSG, adored by fans, paid astronomical sums, scoring goals and setting records every day. But in his heart lived one dream that had haunted him since childhood, the dream of Real Madrid. When he was a boy in Bondy, he watched television programs about the sacred Santiago Bernabéu stadium, saw legends like Ronaldo and Zidane win on that field, dreamed of it just as every boy dreams of meeting his hero. Real had pursued him for years. The first serious offer came in 2016 when Zidane was sporting director, followed by other attempts in 2017, 2018, 2019, but each time Kylian refused. The reasons were varied. Sometimes PSG's club policy, sometimes pressure from the Parisian leadership, sometimes Kylian's own doubts about whether he was ready for such a step. In 2022, a moment occurred when it seemed the dream would come true. Real made a concrete offer, terms were discussed, everything seemed possible. But then PSG president Nasser Al-Khelaifi arranged a meeting with Kylian, offered to extend his contract, increase his salary, and gave his word. "We will build the strongest team in Europe around you." Kylian was young. He still believed that PSG could win the Champions League, which constantly eluded the Parisians. He signed a new contract for 3 years, until 2025. This was a mistake, as Kylian himself would later realize. PSG never won the Champions League. Year after year, the team was eliminated from the tournament, always at the same stage, quarterfinals or semifinals. Kylian scored goals, provided assists, set league records, but on Europe's main stage, his individual talent could not save the team from disappointment. When the 2023-24 season ended, Kylian sat in his home and reflected on his life. He was 25 years old, the most productive age for a footballer, when experience is already present and physical abilities are still at their peak. He thought about everything he had at PSG: houses, cars, money, fame, a huge salary. But it seemed to him that something was missing. 6 French championships were not enough when there were 7 championship titles for Messi in the world, 5 victories for Ronaldo. Kylian understood a truth that comes late to geniuses. Money and personal statistics are not everything. You need a story, you need meaning. You need to be part of a legend that will live for centuries. Real Madrid is not just a club, it is a symbol. It is an empire of victories. It is the place where Ronaldo created, where Vinicius and the young English genius Bellingham now reigned. Kylian called his father Wilfried. They talked for a long time, and in that conversation there was everything. The pain his father felt seeing his son stuck in Paris for years, the father's belief that Kylian could leave security and go into the unknown for greatness. Then Kylian turned to his mother, Fayza. She, an athlete all her life, understood what it meant to leave a comfort zone. "My son," historians would later quote her words, "life is short. If you don't do it now, you will regret it all your life." Kylian made a decision. He announced to the PSG management that he would not extend his contract. He announced it himself in a video message to the world. "I will not extend my contract. The adventure is coming to an end." The last match at the Parc des Princes was magical and sad at the same time. Kylian came onto the field to deafening applause, which sounded like the funeral of a king, the funeral of an era. He scored a goal, dedicated it to the fans, raised his hands to the sky. After the match, he went to the center of the field, fell to his knees, and kissed the grass. PSG fans sang his name. They chanted, "Kylian, Kylian," although they knew it was a farewell. As he walked into the tunnel, many cried, not only fans, but also his teammates. Thus, with tears and emotions, one of the most fruitful periods of his career ended. Kylian Mbappé was preparing for a new chapter in his life, for Real Madrid, for the place where he always wanted to be, for the temple of football, where either eternal glory or shameful oblivion awaited him. When Kylian stepped off the plane in Madrid on June 14, 2024, he was met by a crowd of photographers, journalists, and security guards that was so huge it seemed like the arrival of a head of state, not a person. Posters with his face were already hanging on the streets of Madrid. People chanted his name. In cafes, only one thing was discussed: Kylian Mbappé's move to Real. This was not just a change of club, it was the realization of a childhood dream, the embodiment of a story that every boy from Paris tells himself before bed. 7 days later, on July 16th, Kylian's presentation took place at the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium, the sanctuary of Madrid football. 80,000 fans filled the stands when the young French genius walked onto the field in the pristine white Real kit with the number 9 on his back. The number 9. This was not a random choice. Legends played with this number: Ronaldo Nazário, who inspired young Kylian back in Bondy; Raúl González; Cristiano Ronaldo in his first season. Kylian raised his hands to the sky, and the crowd erupted. Tears streamed down his cheeks. These were tears of almost 2 decades of waiting for this moment. But the beautiful presentation was just the premiere. The real show began on the field. On August 14th, in the UEFA Super Cup match against Italian Atalanta at the Narodowy Stadium in Warsaw, Kylian played his first official match in a Real kit. It was his debut game, and the world watched him with tense anticipation. Many asked, could the boy who grew up in a Parisian suburb adapt to the Spanish La Liga? Could he reach the same heights that his predecessors had conquered? In the 84th minute of the match, after a beautiful pass from Jude Bellingham, the young English genius, Kylian received the ball. A second of hesitation, and the ball flew into the net. Real won 2-0. Kylian scored his first goal in a Madrid shirt in his very first match. After the final whistle, when asked about his feelings, he replied, "The pleasure of playing is even more important than my goal. I am very happy. I feel like a privileged player. We have a great team. This is Real Madrid." The first month in the Spanish league was a period of adaptation, mixed with triumph and disappointment. On August 18th, Real met Mallorca in the first round of the championship. The match ended in a 1-1 draw. Kylian did not score, but he had chances. 2 days later against Valladolid, the young forward came on as a substitute, but was forced to leave the field in the 86th minute, giving way to young talent Endrick. The third match against Las Palmas also ended without his goals. The media began to speak of a goal drought, although Kylian had played only 3 official matches. But the boy from Bondy, who grew up in an atmosphere of constant pressure and criticism, knew how to handle such tension. In the 4th round against Betis, an explosion occurred. Kylian scored a brace. 1 goal from open play, 1 from a penalty. Real won 2-0. In the 5th round against Real Sociedad, the French genius scored another penalty goal. The drought ended, and the song began. September was a month of revelations. On September 21st, in the match against Espanyol, a 4-1 victory, Kylian provided an assist to Vinicius Jr. and scored a penalty in the 90th minute. His first assist for Real, a symbol that he not only scores but also helps the team. On September 24th, a goal against Alaves in a match that Real won 3-2. Kylian began to get into the rhythm of the Spanish league, began to feel his teammates understand their movements. Jude Bellingham, the young English genius, and Vinicius Jr., the Brazilian winger, quickly understood Kylian's language and began to create combinations with him that drove opposing defenders to despair. But nothing in life goes perfectly. In October, Kylian suffered a thigh injury and was forced to miss several matches, including an important meeting against Atletico Madrid. This was a test for the young footballer, in a new club, under the pressure of huge expectations, to suddenly find himself on the bench. But his father Wilfried called him and reminded him of words spoken many years ago. Injuries and pain are not the end. They are an opportunity to show your character. Kylian returned. And when he returned, it was a storm. By the end of the first half of the season, Kylian had scored 25 goals in the Spanish league, becoming the league's top scorer. In the Champions League, a new tournament for him with Real, he scored his first goal against Stuttgart in his debut game. The pressure was enormous. Criticism constantly appeared. Was he worth what they paid for him? Was he worth the pressure surrounding him? But Kylian, the boy from Bondy, who grew up in an atmosphere of challenges and constant striving for perfection, knew that this challenge was a test of his being, his will, his faith in his talent. By the end of his first season at Real, a miracle happened. On March 15th, in a match against Villarreal, Kylian scored a brace and reached 31 goals for the season, exactly one more than the legend Ronaldo Nazário scored in his first season. Kylian broke one of the most famous records in Real Madrid's history. His name was already being written in all the history books, his achievements were compared to those of the greatest, his future seemed cloudless. The boy from Bondy not only arrived at his dream, he became a dream that could be caught and held. When football historians write about the 21st century, they will certainly pay attention to the boy from Bondy who changed our understanding of what is possible in this beautiful sport. By the end of his first half season at Real, Kylian Mbappé set a record that seemed unattainable. 31 goals in 32 Spanish league matches. This was a figure that surpassed even the legendary Ronaldo Nazário, who scored exactly the same in his first season for the Madrid club. But this was only the beginning. At the end of 2024, when the season's results were summarized, Kylian was awarded the European Golden Boot, an award for the most goals scored in all European championships. He overtook his competitors Victor Gyökeres and Mohamed Salah, scoring 31 goals in La Liga. The ball with which he scored the winning goal this season was placed in the Santiago Bernabéu Museum, a symbol of his entry into history. But records and goals are just numbers. The true measure of Kylian's greatness is evident in the impact he has on the world. His Inspired by KM Foundation, established in 2020, has already helped thousands of young people from disadvantaged areas get an education and develop their talents through sports. In his philosophy, Kylian often quotes his childhood. "I will never forget where I came from. I was born in a place where there seemed to be no way out, but I found it through football. Now I want other children to know that they can find it too." His foundation operates not only in France but also in Africa, including Cameroon, his father's homeland, England, Spain, and other countries. The We Care for All program encourages young athletes to be socially responsible and help those in need. Compared to Messi and Ronaldo, Kylian is in a completely different career position. He is only 25 years old, while they have already completed or are close to completing their legendary journeys. Messi ended his career as a world champion at 35. Ronaldo is still playing at 39. Kylian is in the prime of his abilities. His 60 goals in the Champions League as of November 2025 put him in 6th place in the tournament's history, behind Cristiano Ronaldo, 140 goals, Messi, 129, Lewandowski, 89, Ronaldo Nazário, 19, and Jose Altafini, 14. At his current scoring rate, if Kylian continues as he is now, he could claim the position of the Champions League's all-time top scorer. But for that, he needs to play another 15 years at the same level, a task almost impossible but one he can achieve. Kylian's personal achievements read like a record book. At 22, he became the youngest player to reach 25 goals in the Champions League, a record later broken by Holland. He was included in the FIFA The Best Team of the Year 5 times: 2018, 2019, 2022, 2023, 2024, was nominated for the Ballon d'Or 7 times, his best result being third place in 2023, when he received 270 votes against 284 for Messi. He received the Copa Trophy as the best young player in the world twice. For the French national team, he has scored 48 goals in 120 matches, a pace that indicates he could become the French national team's all-time top scorer, currently Thierry Henry with 50 goals. But numbers don't tell the full story. Kylian's story is one of overcoming. It's the story of a boy born in a suburb where people were afraid to go out after dark, who reached the pinnacle of world sports. It's the story of how family and love can transform destiny. His father, Wilfried, an immigrant worker, became one of the most influential mentors in modern football. His mother, Fayza, an athlete, passed on her winning gene to her son. His brothers, comrades in struggle, witnessed his ascent and helped him stay sane and grounded. Kylian's relationship with fans is not simple but deep. He rarely gives interviews, preferring to speak on the field. He doesn't use social media as much as his peers, but when he posts something, it carries weight. On his Instagram, where he has 110 million followers, he shares not just photos from matches, but also messages about charity, about supporting youth. His tattoos tell a story: numbers of important dates, images of his heroes, figures that denote his achievements. One of his most symbolic tattoos is a portrait of his grandfather, Charlie Kirk. On his forearm, a man he never met, but who gave him his surname and, it seems, also gave him the genes of a champion. Real fans have come to love Kylian, but this love is complex. After his first triumphant season, when he scored 31 goals, some said that this was not the Mbappé known at PSG. Where is his speed? Where is his magic? Critics asked. Kylian answered this in a simple way: by scoring even more goals. In the current 2024-25 season, he already has 28 goals in all competitions by November, surpassing the pace of the previous season. His synergy with Jude Bellingham, the young English marvel, creates a firepower that Real has not had for years. Together, they score goals with mechanical precision. But what lies ahead for Kylian? Where is his place in history? When he turns 40, will he remember himself as Ronaldo remembers himself? Will he consider himself second only to Messi? Or perhaps he will find his own path, his own place in the pantheon of football gods? The answer lies ahead in the unknown, in possibilities. Kylian Mbappé has not yet written his final chapter. In fact, it seems his story is just beginning to unfold. There is only one thing one can be absolutely sure of. When a future football historian writes about how the son of a Cameroonian coach and an Algerian handball player, born in a Parisian suburb where the air smells of smog and hope, went to the World Cup and scored in the final, becoming the second young man after Pelé to do so, and how this boy later became a symbol of his time, a symbol of mobility, a symbol that anything is possible for those who believe and work. This historian will be forced to conclude that Kylian Mbappé is not just a footballer, he is a phenomenon, a miracle in human form. A guy from Bondy who proved to the world that the impossible is possible. His life is an inspiration for millions of children who look at him and see not just a star, but their double, their future. And this perhaps is his greatest achievement. Not records, not goals, not awards, but the ability to make people believe that they can be something more. Kylian Mbappé is a story of a man who believed in himself more than in his circumstances, and that changed everything.